Today we're painting sunflowers, and I'm going to be using Holbein watercolours, and we're going to be painting sunflowers in a vibrant, loose and expressive way. So paint along step by step. First of all, I'm going to start just with some very simple info on how to draw up your flower. Always break your drawings down to the largest shapes and then put the smallest shapes and details in later. So the first part of the flower is a big ellipse where the petals, like it's the outline of the petals, and then you've got an inner ellipse where the petals start, where they're formed. So you've got 1, 2 and 3 sections, and then the second section is actually where the leaves are, where they come out from the base of the flower. So just pop those in very, very loosely. Don't try and draw any detail. We're not doing botanical, it's just a very loose way of painting sunflowers. And don't have all your leaves, all the petals, like a picket fence. So, make them fairly random in their shapes and loose. If you hold your pencil closer to the end of the pencil, you'll find that you can it's much easier to achieve these sort of random marks rather than if you hold your pencil like you're writing a letter. Not that anybody does these days, but yeah, so keep it loose and just randomly and quickly put in your shapes. And again, reduce everything to the largest shape. So the big leaf here is almost a triangle. It's got a bit of a dip in the centre. So come in, just do the dip and then, round out the edges. And you can get that lovely shape of the leaf quite simply. And look at the angle that the leaf is shaped across the front of that stem. So it's darker behind the leaf and below the leaf. So then just draw in the next leaf. You don't have to follow the photograph slavishly if you don't want to. You can put your own interpretation there. This is just a guide. And I think drawing it up first before you start painting gives you a good idea of where your lights and darks are going to be, and these are so important for any painting. The tones is extremely important. It's more important than the colour that you're using. If you get your lights and darks correct, the painting will look really good. So now I'll get my good paper and I'll start to draw that up for you. I will put the image that we're painting down the bottom further on in the video so that you can use that as your reference. So the big ellipse for the outside edges of the petals, get the angles right where the petals spring from, and that bowl at the bottom where the leaves form and cover the petals. And again, angle that next, the very large leaf across. So the inner section of the petals, they form another ellipse, sort of in the centre there. So you can see, if you want to do the correct proportions, just measure and see how far it is from the bottom of this bowl to where the petals finish, and then how far is it across the centre. The centre of the sunflower's probably not as large as you think in proportion to the petals, so just check those two measurements before you start. And again, just lightly sketch in the details loosely. So I've sort of raced ahead here. I've actually lost a video. I don't know what happened to that. But I'm mixing up now Quinacridone Red and Aureolin Yellow for a rich transparent yellow. In the right hand well there, I've got Aureolin Yellow, and in the top one, I've got Cad Yellow Orange. That's opaque. The other two mixes are transparent. So just bear that in mind. Keep your paints transparent and only use opaques right over the top as a final punch of colour. The background there that I have used is just, what have I used? I've used permanent rose, and I've used Cobalt Blue. So I've just put them down randomly on dry paper, and then I've spread them out with water, making sure I've got very soft edges where I've faded it out from very dark to nothing. At the moment, I'm mixing up the green for the leaves. So in this particular puddle was Prussian Blue and Quinacridone Gold, both very powerful pigments. This one here is the same colour that I've used for the background. So that's Cobalt Blue and some permanent rose, but I've put into that some Mars Violet. So Mars Violet's a fabulous colour for greying off something. So if the leaves on the mix that I just put my brush into there is too bright for me, so I've added to that mix some more Quinacridone Gold and some Mars Violet. So, whoops, I think I must still have had some, excuse me, some Prussian Blue in that. So those leaves, in actual fact, the petals, sorry, are not as yellow as, they're not as green as that. They are more yellow. I think it's the monitor on my screen. So they are actually Aureolin Yellow, but they're cool yellow and they're transparent. So leave a little bit of white. Don't cover up every piece of white paper or you'll lose the sparkle in these leaves. You can always go over it right at the end if you think you've got too much white paper showing, but if you cover it all up at this stage, you won't be able to get those sparkly bits back. So looking down at my image that's now in the bottom left hand corner, you can see how that far distant section of the flower is quite dark. So this mix is Quinacridone Red and Aureolin Yellow that I'm putting in just for the dark sections where it's in shadow. So just, there are some dark areas to some of those petals, so just loosely put them in. And again, don't stress too much, just keep it fairly loose, and this is just the first layer of colour. So it's not the final layer, so you don't have to make it perfect. So the two lots there are blending really well together. Just put a little bit more dark at the base of the petals. It's quite in a bit of shadow. And then I'm going to put some, repeat your colours. So I'm putting yellow into that leaf, which is a mixture of the Quinacridone Red and the Aureolin Yellow. So get that to come down. The paper was dry when I've done this. So over the top of that, just touch some mix of the warmer green, which is Phthalo Blue, Quinacridone Gold, and a little bit of Mars Violet, just to grey it off a little bit. So that paint and the paper there now, the paint was very wet, so it's going to keep merging and changing until it's dry. So I'll leave that and go over to this leaf, which I've done very dark. using the same two mixtures again. And the paint is quite dry. Always adjust the brush so that you've got just the right amount of pigment. If I put my brush in there with too much pigment on, it's just going to pour into that yellow and all of the petals there will go green. So I don't want to overpower that. I want a little bit of bleeding of the green into the yellow, but not too much. So moving over to the next leaf, I've got warm and cool colours there. I've got light and dark, so that keeps it interesting and makes it look like the light is landing on the top of those leaves. So this is quite a dark mix, and it's greyed off a little bit, as you can see from the other greens. That's the Mars Violet. And again, I'm just dropping some yellows into there. That's just a bit of Cad Yellow orange going in over the top. So just putting another layer now of transparent, the transparent orange, the Quinacridone Red and the Aureolin Yellow. And the brush I'm using is a beautiful handmade calligraphy brush. It's got two types of hair. So there's very, very soft goat hair on the outside, and there's a stiffer hair on the inside, which makes it perfect for painting just about anything. You have a beautiful point, so if you want to dry off your brush just slightly, you can make a lovely point with this brush. Now on the lower two leaves, you can see little bits of light have emerged. I sprinkled that with water, and it's just pushed the pigment around a little bit and broken it up slightly so it's not just one flat colour. Now to put the stem in, if you put your brush down loaded with pigment, but thick pigment and not too wet, and just draw your brush very quickly down your paper, you'll get lovely skips appearing. So just don't fuss, just put your brush down and go straight to the bottom, and see how those little sparkles appear. And I think that's all you need to do for the stem. I'll come back in and I'll darken up the shadow area just under the leaf there. So now that that's drier, it's almost dry. So I'm just doing some restating the darks for the final tones. So the mix is the same that I've used before, just a stronger mix, so just less water. So if you want to go darker with your green for your leaves, mix up exactly the same colours, Quinacridone Gold, Prussian Blue, drop in a little bit of Mars Violet, and you'll find that without much water, you get that beautiful, strong, rich, dark mix. Now, watercolour will keep fading until it's dry. It's the only medium that changes until it is dry. So it'll dry 20% lighter than what it is here on the paper. So I'm just mixing up some more violet, and for that I'm using Cobalt Blue, and I want to make it a little bit cooler, so I'm putting more blue in so that I've got a cool violet rather than a warm violet. And I'm going to, in the shadowed side of the centre, I'm not going to do all those millions of little stamens. I'm just going to put in very strong pigment. So leave a tiny little bit of light. If you go over all your light, don't worry, just sprinkle some water on it when you've finished. But do try and outline some of those petals for a bit of impact with the centre of your flower. I'm just encouraging that to run up the petals, just ever so slightly. Okay, now I'm going to mix up some burnt sienna. Holbein burnt sienna is beautiful, rich, warm colour, which will complement the yellow, the orange, and also do amazing things with that purple centre when I hit it with some water. And I'll encourage that to come across the paper with just water. So there's some tiny little sections there that are just a little bit darker with the shadows. So I'm linking those up. And now just with water, I'll get that mix of burnt sienna just to drift across the paper almost. I'm just strengthening some of the tones there with just a mix of burnt sienna and a little bit of Quinacridone Red and Aureolin Yellow. Okay, so there's the finished flower. So you can see it's loose, vibrant and colourful. It's got lots of light and dark within the petals. I've splattered water on the two lower leaves so it's broken up the pigment a little bit, and I've sprinkled some water into the top right hand section of the background as well, so that's got a little bit of texture in it. The other thing I've done, I've sprinkled or splattered, just get a piece of paper, tear a circle out, and I placed it over the centre of the sunflower and splattered some cooler blues into the pale section, and then I've hit it with some sprinkles of burnt sienna, and I've put a few sprinkles of just water with some white paint over the blue section. Thanks for watching. Happy painting.